Y'all some good brothers.
You said what?
Y'all some good brothers.
Appreciate that. Takes one to know one. You already know. All right, let's get straight to it. Okay. Peace and Black Power, mighty Africans. We are back with another rendition of our hard teaching political education series. This is the third night 2-hour series. The topic is building our Black nation. We are you all are in for another profound and rigorous consciousness raising experience. Certainly, as I always say, we're at the African Black Coalition, we are intentional with our political education, right? We don't necessarily just, pick certain topics and find cool speakers and just say, hey, political education, right? It's a very focused application, right, of intellectual resources. So, this is another addition to the application. So without further ado, my name is Mukono Tandaji. I'm the Political Education Director for the African Black Coalition. Again, this is Hard Teaching with ABC. This is our Black August program. And I'm going to let our very, very, very special guest of the hour, Brother Salih Muhammad, I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Mukono. Peace, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening. For those that know me, I'm Brother Salih. I am outgoing director of the African Black Coalition, but I also serve as the director and principal of the Muhammad University of Islam, Los Angeles. I have a genuine breadth of experience as it relates to helping our people and working to ensure that our people can build institutions for themselves. If it's okay with you, Mukono, you want me to get started?
The floor is yours, good brother.
So my brother Mukono asked me to give some commentary and some thoughts on the topic and the notion of building a Black nation. And a younger me would have developed a very elaborate speech that would have gone into the intricacies of what it takes to build a nation. What are the components of a nation? What are the routes? What are the methodologies necessary in order for us to build a nation, right? But as I thought about it, my spirit wasn't really there. And it's because in my earlier days, I believe I was convinced in some ways that part of the reason our people have such slowness to progress is because we've lacked the skill sets necessary to build a Black nation, right? That if we had the engineers, if we had the architects, if we had the organizing capacity and skill set to nation build, right, we will be doing that. But in experience and with time, there's a couple of recognitions that I have, right? And one recognition that there are some of us that are attempting to nation build, right? Now, what's unfortunate today is that attempt to nation build isn't always clear or genuine, but there are attempts, right? Not only are there attempts, we do have skill sets and resources internal to our community that are necessary when it comes to like a real honest question of nation building. But what I would offer, and I didn't intend to get straight to the point like this, but what I would offer is that what our people lack isn't nation building skills necessarily. What we lack is people building skills, right? If you think about the types of infrastructures that we look to in awe, right? If you're from LA, you might look at the Walt Disney Concert Hall, and it's a beautiful facility. If you are in other parts of the world, you might look at castles, you might look at the pyramids, right? And these things are beautiful facilities that demonstrate an external expression of the beautiful majesty of the mind of man and woman. But what we neglect too often as we build those beautiful facilities is on the other side of those beautiful facilities, there are often very broken, corrupt people and systems. So as we aspire to build a Black nation, I think the biggest thing that I would actually offer is that it's not so much about building these external edifices. It's much more so important for us to develop the internal framework of pragmatism and internal framework of self-development. And it's in that work that we're actually able to get to the point of building a Black nation. And bear with me, please, because in some ways it's a newer conceptual revelation for myself, that in as much as we strive hard and we attempt to do this advocacy work, we attempt to fight on behalf of our people, we attempt to secure homes and jobs and economic resources for our people, the truth of the matter is, from my vantage point, is that all of these efforts and attempts are almost futile, because the level of self and personal development that we have independently as individuals does not allow us to actually develop the sort of collectivism and the sort of collective progress that we desire. So my teacher, Minister Farrakhan, taught in the early 80s, he began releasing study guides. And the study guides were titled Self-Improvement, the Basis for Community Development. And if you haven't ever picked them up, they're phenomenal studies, because he utilizes the language of the scriptures of Bible and Quran, the language of historical experience and his own personal experience, to help the reader travel through their own journey of self-development. For through that journey of self-development, it is only through that we can all collectively find ourselves in a better condition as a people, right? So I think for me, where I would begin and center any conversation of nation building actually isn't on building the external edifice of nation, it's building the nation within self. If you are into any spiritual science or spiritual understanding, you will come to understand that everything in the external world is a reflection of that which is already internal to the self, right? If we are seeking to find a way to find unity, right? A great example of unity is the human body, where we can look in our body and the heart does its job and the leg does its job, and they're not vying with one another over who gets the most shine, or over who gets paid the most, or over the kind of silly things that we argue about, right? And so I say that to say that the reason the things that we are attempting to produce as a community is faulty, it is because our own very selves are faulty. It's a great book about organizational management by the former CEOs of Google called How Google Works. And one of the things they write in the book, they say an organization is in the shadow of its leadership. So in the Bible, there's a scripture that reads in the book of Isaiah, it says that their leaders, referring to us as a people, their leaders cause them to err. So from the top all the way down to the bottom, on every level of Black engagement and Black life and Black responsibility, we find the corrupted sense of self. I know my brother Taharka would appreciate the reference in the ways in which the colonial slave master sought to abase and deconstruct the Black man specifically and his sense of identity. And when he does that, not only does he deconstruct our sense of identity, our sense of understanding of what makes us who we are, right? He replaces it with his own sense of identity, his own sense of self, his own sense of what a man ought to be. And so then you have a body of people who have lost their natural sense of self and instead are seeking to become like the slave master that stole from them their sense of self, right? And the scripture, the way it reads is that it says God made man in his own image and after his own likeness, right? Well, the white man, in all truth, he's a god of his society. He operates as a god of his society. He is the apex of his society. And he ensures that no one gets past the pinnacle that he has established. Well, when that's the case, whoever you bow down or submit to, you become like. We have submitted to, willingly or unwillingly, we have submitted to our former slave master. And as a result, we have become like them. And in that becoming like them, we as a people have a dissonance between what our inherent nature is driving us to do and what our attempt to replicate their behavioral practices has promised us we will receive, right? So I'm still on this notion of self-development and self-improvement being the basis of any true nation building. If the basis of our nation building is all external and economic, then what happens is that you build a temporary nation that is not able to survive the natural ebbs and flows of time. If we look at Cuba, for example, and I'm going to connect Cuba to a piece around Che Guevara, is a great quote. But if you take Cuba, for example, one of the things you'll learn when you study the revolutionary history of Cuba is that once Fidel and Che and the 12 men and women that went with him to launch that revolution, once they launched, they tried it one time and it was unsuccessful. And Fidel came to an understanding that you cannot have a revolution unless the people on the ground, the masses, what Marx would call the lumpen proletariat, actually were in agreement with what you desired. And if you don't have that, then whatever attempt at revolution that you make, it's ultimately just going to backfire and cost you your life. So the second time around, Fidel goes in, and what they do is that they build a base in the mountains, in the mountainous regions of Cuba. And while building this base in the mountainous regions of Cuba, they slowly develop the spirit of the people, so that the spirit of the people would be revolutionary and not just the spirit of a few select leaders of the people, right? And what difference does this make? What the difference it made is that as the revolution grew and ultimately they would successfully have their revolution, when it was time for the people to make the necessary sacrifices for that revolution to survive, they were willing to do so. When it meant we as a nation might have to live in more poverty because the West hates us, we might be more willing to do that because we understand and we have taken upon us the spirit of revolution. If it means that every citizen of Cuba bears arms in the event that the United States of America attacks, that the entire nation is prepared, right? So what that does is that it allows us to have a greater longevity or sense of permanence in the work that we're doing when we do that work from a place and from a space of internal development. Now, the challenge, brother, is internal work is not very cute and it's not easily observable, right? Nobody knows whether that leader has envy in their hearts. Nobody knows whether or not you are doing this work because you love our people or because you can get paid by our people. Nobody knows whether or not you are doing this work or engaging in quote unquote nation building or protesting or in activism because there's a nice grant at the end or because you're genuinely concerned. These are things that are more often than not hidden in the darkness. And it's in the darkness that the diseases of the heart begin to fester and permeate into our organizations. Now, again, on that notion of organizations take on the shadow of its leadership. Now, if we have leaders that have diseases in our hearts, we have leaders that are driven more by envy and jealousy than by love and appreciation of our people, then that naturally begins to disseminate and distribute into the hearts of the people. I know this is an odd approach to thinking about nation building, but I literally cannot emphasize enough, there is no such thing as nation building if we are not developing the edifice of self first. It is the edifice of self that eventually becomes nation. But what happens a lot of times in our organizing work is that we are jumping above, across, and through the responsibility to improve self with under a pretense or under a false idea that we're trying to help others. You know, there's this passage in the Quran that says, would man take care of other souls while neglecting his own? Right? So it's how can we as leaders say that we are going to be responsible for organizations and entities and economic structures and revolution, etc. And we haven't had the internal revolution yet. We haven't had the spiritual development yet that is actually required at this junction in time. And that is why I would offer that our leadership today is so daggone ineffective. Our leadership today is ineffective because the souls of men and women are corrupted. Not only are we corrupted by being driven by the wrong desires, the desire for greed, the desire for lust, the desire for sex, the desire for money, the desire for popularity, right? These desires are corrupting what will be the natural spirit of revolution, but we're also corrupted by what some of us will call trauma in our own experiences, right? But I will offer, see, trauma is a natural aspect of life. What we are inhibited by is not only do we experience these traumas that we don't handle in the best way, but we layer these traumatic experiences with spiritual deficiencies, right? So not only do I have pain from something I might have gone through when I was younger, right? But I also have deficiencies in terms of my desire to feel appreciated and loved, my desire to be the center of attention. And because we don't deal with the spiritual development of self, we put ourselves at a severe disadvantage when it comes to actually being able to address the conditions of our people. Now, I think the last point I'll make here that I mentioned Cuba. Now, I wanted to come back to this beautiful quote from our brother Che Guevara, and I'm gonna paraphrase it, but Che says something, he's writing a letter to a student. So after the revolution, we'll get some context. After the revolution, Cuba almost immediately is thwarted into poverty, and their ability to do a lot of the things that they were able to do prior as a result of white Americans being there to put that bread in, right? They're not able to do quite as much, right? So a young person writes Che, and they're interested in going to college for art. And Che writes back in the newspaper. It's a public write back. Che writes back in the newspaper, and he says, you know, we have to get rid of rabid individualism. And he says that our desire for collective success must begin to be greater than our desire for individual prosperity. And this is a crucial aspect of nation building. There is no way Black people can get out of the condition that we are in without some of us making some very real, honest sacrifices. And I don't mean the sacrifice of I work a 9 to 5, I get paid to be an activist. That's not the sacrifice I mean. I mean, we have to make very genuine, honest sacrifices. A sacrifice is giving that which you do not have to give. It's giving the dollar that you don't think you can give because you have rent. That's the sacrifice I'm saying, right? It's giving your time when you don't have any time available. That's the sacrifice. So Che goes on in his letter, and Che says that, you know, how is art? And this is hurtful, but he's making a very honest point, right? He says, how is art going to help our people in a revolution when we don't have food? No, we need agriculturalists. We need engineers. And my point isn't even so much the fact that we do need agriculturalists and engineers, because that is true. My point is more so we have agriculturalists and engineers in our communities, but we have agriculturalists and engineers that are not willing to make the necessary sacrifice necessary so that your agricultural engineering expertise can go beyond the benefit of oneself. That's the aspect that we're missing. We are missing the willingness to sacrifice. So in all truth, Brother McConan, we aren't quite ready to build a nation yet. How do I know? If we were ready to build a nation, we will be found doing so. So I think, and I kind of wrap here, and then I'll open out. I know you have a couple of questions you want to throw out, McConan. How do I know that we're not ready to do nation building? Because we will be doing it already. You see, when a child is ready to walk, nobody has to tell that child, come on, baby, you're 5 years old, it's time to walk. Right? When a child is ready to eat, nobody has to tell the child, come on, it's time to eat now. No, it is a natural instinct and desire that when we desire something great enough, our desire, Minister Farrakhan, right, in the study guide, our desire feeds our will. And when the desire is strong enough, then it strengthens the will. And over time, the will becomes so strong that anything we desire in our mind, we can make it into a reality, right? We don't desire freedom in truth. Most of us only desire a better relationship with our former slave master. And that is why, and I'm bringing this "that is why" to an end. But that is why we can't pull ourselves up out of this condition. We don't really desire to do so yet. No, the God will continue to force the enemy to make us suffer until we realize there is no hope in collaboration. There is only hope in separation. If you have noticed, right, if you really pay attention to the last year, the last 6 months in particular, what you are witnessing is it is constant godly pressure, the kind of pressure that is made to force you to bend your will. We are being forced to bend our will. We are being forced into a recognition, they really don't care. Not only they really don't care, but we really have to do something for ourselves. There really is no other option. And sometimes, Brother McConan, you don't learn that lesson just by reading history, unfortunately. And it's funny because literally 4 years ago, I was on the opposite end. 4 years ago, I believed very much so that we could teach our people, we could show them, we could train them to understand that's your enemy, and we must build a nation for ourselves. But some children, don't matter how many times you tell them the iron is hot, they don't really understand until they've touched that iron. And some will touch it more than once. Some will touch it a couple of times, right? We as a people, we are touching that fire over and over again right now. And what we are learning in a very experiential way. We're not learning it from a book. We're not learning it by watching documentaries or from a history channel. No, we're learning it through the lived experience of life. We are learning that we must make ourselves sufficient for ourselves. I am confident that we have the skill sets, the talent, the intellectual capacity, the resources, the organizing skills to really make our condition better. That part isn't questionable to me. What's questionable to me is at what point will we collectively say enough is enough? We have to try something else, right? Okay, this is really my last point before I go back to you, McConney. 5 years ago, the minister called for our people to come to DC under a banner and an umbrella, justice or else. And I remember, we took some folks from ABC, we took some students from Berkeley and whatnot, and students from throughout the system. And I remember hearing discussions what's going to happen when we get there? We going to fight? We going to go to war? And I remember then I had enough maturity to know, that wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense to bring us all out here for the slaughter. That's not how it's going to crack. But what I've come to develop more and more since then is that sometimes a messenger can give you a message and it take you time to understand the validity of that message. And when you understand the validity of the message, then you act on the message, not necessarily when the message was delivered, right? So if you can imagine, sometimes, there are things your mom or your father or your parent or an uncle or somebody might say to you when you're 11, 12, 13, right? Black folks have these cultural sayings. When somebody show you their ass, believe them, right? We have these cultural sayings. But when you're 11, it's kind of like, whatever, mom, you just don't like my friend. But when you hit 19, 20, and some of your friends are real wild and you're starting to experience betrayal, now those words from 9 years ago have a much greater relevance to you now because your experience in life have allowed you to match what was given to you 9 years ago. And I think that's literally what we're seeing, right? What we're seeing now is our people as a whole are increasingly getting to a point of justice or else. It doesn't have to be called out now. It doesn't have to be said, right? When you see things like the NBA players saying, we're not going to play, we're going to shut the playoffs down. And even though they recanted, whatever, but the very fact that the idea was there and was seriously taken, right? It shows a progression in our people's collective mindset, where our collective mindset is increasingly saying, I don't know about that. Our collective mindset is increasing, saying, I don't know about that vote solution. You know? And all of our leaders aren't there yet, but the ones that don't get there, they'll be pushed out. So I think I'll wrap right there. And I think what I wanted to emphasize today more than anything, brother, is that nation building is much more so about the development and the building of the self than it is about these external fixtures. The external fixtures come and go, but the human being, when they are in the process of perfecting oneself, that type of human being lives on into longevity, right? Think about a Kobe or a Michael Jordan, right, et cetera, right? These folks who really work to master themselves in this particular element and way. That's what we need. We need us to master ourselves, to be masters in relating to one another, masters in the treatment of our spouses, masters in purging envy and jealousy from our hearts, masters in self-examination, self-analysis, and self-correction. It's when we do these elements that it will become easy to build a nation. It will become so easy for us to make the kind of what they refer to as horizontal progress, which will be identified by the buildings and the farmland and the et cetera, right? That part becomes easy when the internal self gets corrected, right? So many of our organizations die not because we had the wrong vision, the wrong philosophy, the wrong execution, but because the individuals were faulty. You know what I'm saying? Envy and jealousy that has destroyed us from within.
Right.
The lack of love of self and others has destroyed us from within. And these are the deeper spiritual dynamics that we're not touching. And I said I was done. And so this is really my last point. There's a passage in the Quran that says, Allah changes not the condition of a people until they change their own condition. But some other translators from the Arabic into the English, they say that it actually translating says, it says, Allah changes not the condition of a people until the people change the condition of their hearts. It's our hearts that has diseases. And these diseases of the hearts that is not seen by others, that nobody knows but you and your God, these are the things that are inhibiting us severely from making the progress that we desire to make as a people. More than anything else, it is the deep spiritual ailments that we as a people are not solving. And I know that was probably a little bit off of the projected trajectory you might have imagined, Brother McConan, but that's what came to my mind as I was thinking about what it takes for us to build a nation. It takes for us not to build external. We have to do the internal building first. And from the internal building, then you can build an external world that is perfect, because our people just won't be satisfied with a gross, disgusting external world that isn't based in real development of the persons and of the selves. So I'm gonna stop there, and I know you have some questions, Brother McConan, and you don't have to make the questions in response to the context I set. But that is a framework and a context that I think is really important to the work that we do.
Indeed. Thank you, brother. Definitely. I mean, my mind is racing right now. But there were just, as you were speaking, there were a few like passages and excerpts from various works and lectures from some of our ancestors. So I just wanted to read just a few of them because they are definitely pertinent to everything that you spoke on. So I'll read a few of them, and then if you have any follow-up thoughts to them, then you can definitely share them. The first one comes from John Henrik Clarke, one of our master teachers, in his book Notes for an African World Revolution. There's this section where he talks about leadership. And again, what he says here, I believe, is very relevant to what you were saying, Brother Salih, especially when it comes to the minds, hearts, and souls of many of our so-called leaders today, right? That there's a neglect to examine, right, or try to figure out those minds and hearts and souls of our leaders, right? We seemingly just sort of accept, right? Whosoever stands up and says, all right, I'm leading us out of here, right? So what John Henrik Clarke says is that I think that we need to examine all of these ego-starved people now on the scene of leadership, talking about Pan-Africanism with one breath and spreading dissension between people with the other. I think we need to come down a little harder, and we need to examine people a little more thoroughly. If they cannot take the examination, they don't deserve the job of leadership. And that notion of examination, I believe, is crucial. When we think about, right, and you had said it, Brother Salih, right, the mere construction of external entities and institutions, right, those acts in and of themselves are temporary, right? They're limited, right? You can only build a house and it'll only stand for so long if those things that, prove longevity are not embedded within, right? So that notion of examination really stood out for me when you were speaking on the minds, hearts, and souls of our, so-called leaders today. Did you have any sort of maybe response or thought to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's a meaningful quote. I would say, however, that the examination that we need to do is not an examination of the other leaders on the scene. The examination that we need to do is an examination of oneself. What qualifies us to give an examination of others? What makes us able to make a real examination, right? The examination that we need to give is the examination of self. I love this philosophy from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I call it the clean glass philosophy. The clean glass philosophy says, brother, you don't have to condemn the dirty glass. Just put a clean glass up next to it. See, as a people, we have a sort of fratricidal nature that we've learned in the context of being in the white man's world, where we're always so willing and so quick to condemn and to bring down that which is out there that might be striving to reflect or striving to uplift or just pimping the people. Now, make no mistake, it's absolutely some pimps out there, 100%. It is absolutely, and and it disturbs my soul, to be honest. It is absolutely some of us that are out there who are doing this work or pretending to do this work because they can make $1 off the people. The scripture says, all that came before me were thieves and robbers, right? That is a fact. Our leaders are causing us to err. That is a fact. However, the solution to that problem isn't for us to look out and say, oh yeah, that one, yeah, they just in it for the money, or that one, they got a bunch of women, or that one, they just want us to. That's not the solution. You see, I don't have to go and condemn what somebody else is doing. I just do good work. And when you do good work and you're sincere, then the law of nature will bring you up and elevate you as a clean glass. And the people will choose a clean glass over a dirty glass every single time. And I will say this, to compound onto that. One of the tactics of the enemy and the COINTELPRO and COINTELPRO-like organizations and entities is this constant willingness or encouragement of the bashing, the demeaning of Black leaders, right? Think about, for example, Dr. King and the FBI knowing the influence of Dr. King, knowing the significance of Dr. King, and knowing the sort of moral standard Dr. King was relying on. And what did they do? They dropped a little tape, a sex tape of Dr. King and a woman that was not his wife. What was their intention? Right. Their intention was to destroy the character of the leader, because by destroying the character of the leader, it becomes 10 times easier to destroy the leader, his or herself. Now, we as a people have found ourselves in a position where we don't need the enemy to go destroy the character of our leaders, because we do it ourselves. You know, my mama or one of my elders used to say, you know, we Black people get the leaders that we deserve. See, we have great leaders like Marcus Garvey. We had great leaders like Marcus Garvey, I should say. And we condemned Marcus Garvey. We had great leaders like W.E.B. And when these leaders are alive, we condemn them. in as much as the enemy does. And today, in the age of social media, where clout chasing is done by means of condemnation of others, right? Our means of rising up on the totem pole of so-called influence is done on the basis of our ability and willingness to condemn others. Now it complicates this sort of examination of our leaders, right? Now, I actually don't think that what we need to do is do more examination and more criticism of our leaders. No, I think we need to do more examination and more criticism of self, you know? And in private circles, I'll add this clarification, in private circles, I think it's okay, appropriate, and even necessary to do that internal critique and development, but on public, really look at how our behavior is.
Mm-hmm.
Social media is so disgusting.
Yeah.
Because you see some of our worst leanings to go to the absolute worst. The nation will say we settle on the worst part, meaning that many of us, we see somebody doing some good, and instead of looking for the good that they're doing, we look for the worst possible aspect of what they're doing, and we settle there. Nah, that's wicked. That's not solid, right? Because we all have a dark side, right? None of us are pure light. We all try to reflect the best sides of ourselves, but all of us have a dark side that we don't want the world to know. You know what I'm saying? Right. Does that mean that you are less or more qualified? I don't know. I'm not your judge. What I do know is if I do me better, if I work on me better, then I can bring me and my people in a better condition on the basis of the work that I'm doing. So that's what I would say, Brother McConey, is that we got to examine self.
Definitely. So, and again, as you're speaking, different like quotes and stuff kind of pop up in my head. I'm reminded of a lecture that Kwame Ture gave, and he said, Kwame Ture is one of my favorite speakers just because he uses such poignant language, right? But in no way is it this like complex like vernacular, right? Like he doesn't descend from his like intellectual perch to right, you know what I'm saying? So in this lecture he says, if you want somebody to follow something that you are telling them, which you're presenting it as good advice, right? He says the best way to make them follow that is to be the best example of the advice you're giving, right? And I can remember hearing that and almost a light bulb going off just for me personally, right? Not to say it was this, grand revelation or a surprise, but it was like, yeah, of course. What credibility do I have, right? If I gather a group of Africans and I say, here's a list of recommended reading, right? And I say, here, read this, right? And the people say, well, which one is your favorite? Oh, I haven't read any of them. In what, like you said, right, with the examination, right? What position do I have, right? What sort of credibility do I have to my name, right? If I'm presenting this particular resource or this information, right? If I have not done, right, the necessary study in that example, right? And in that same lecture, he also goes on, and I thought about this when you spoke on the notion of sacrifice. He said that the best thing about working for the people is that what you really give for the people, sometimes nobody else knows except you, and that this is real struggle for the people, right? And that is really profound on so many levels, right? We sometimes misinterpret our organizing and our efforts and our objectives, right, as these things that are to be sort of unveiled before the people, right? Like, look at how much I gave up, right? Or look at how much, our organization sacrificed, right? And what Kwame Ture is saying is that isn't necessarily the case in terms of achieving that real struggle, achieving that true work, right? Or that tangible progress, right? So again, I'm just kind of thinking of these things. And then at the same time, it's certainly no coincidence, right? Or no mistake that we are having this discussion on building our Black nation, right? And you're taking it in this internal nation produces external nation, right? It's Fred Hampton's born day, right? And one of the most notable things that Fred Hampton would say was he would say, "I am the people," right? And he would, what made Fred Hampton such a mighty warrior was his ability to light that revolutionary fire, right, within people, right, because he himself had that fire lit, right? And I think that just that notion of I am the people, right, taking that full collective accountability, responsibility, ownership, right, of the people is something that not very many of us can do, right? It's a certain level that you reach in terms of having that internal nation built, right? Because you can't walk around trying to proclaim the necessary, policies and procedures to building that external nation, right, if that internal is in shambles, right? So I guess my question, or just to ask your thoughts, right? What would you sort of, how would you interpret just that real simple affirmation, right, of I am the people? Like how would you receive that?
Yeah, I think that's a really great quote. The first thing I would say is what's interesting is that today, nobody would say that. Nobody would say I am the people today, because today Blackness is multifaceted and Blackness has so many different elements. And what do we say? Our college folks say Blackness is not monolithic, right? And it's this deep revelation that, some of us want to be slaves, and some of us don't want to be slaves, and some of us want to be poor, and some of us don't want to. And so we have this deepness, this deep paralysis of analysis, my father's generation would say, with this deep analysis around how Blackness is so much, and therefore, Black people in these settings always say, I don't represent all Black people, right? And I think it's BS, right? Because to be Black, inherent to it is a connection to other Black people, right? The notion that I am the people is a really beautiful notion, because what it is at its root, at its essence, is really a statement and a demonstration of love, right? I am my foot. Somebody steps on my toe, my foot doesn't respond separate and divorced from the rest of my body. Somebody hits me in my jaw, my foot might kick you. You get what I'm saying? Right. So I am the people. I love the people as I love myself.
Yep.
We have a hard time approaching that today because our love just is not deep enough too often. Too often, I am the people when it's convenient, right? I am the people when I can benefit from it. But I'm not the people when it comes to holding the weight and the tremendous responsibility of living a standard for the people, of fighting for the people, of dying for the people, right? And our brother Fred Hampton did all those things. But I think I love the juxtaposition of thinking of Fred Hampton saying, I am the people. And that's as a general, particularly our Black intellectual class today, having this unwillingness to represent the people, but at the same time representing the people. And that's where it's a little weird, it's a little fake, right? Because the same folks that were telling me I don't speak on behalf of Black people, very much so will go meet with the president and speak on behalf of Black people, President Obama at least, right? And so there's this way in which we've been convinced of this lack of need for leadership. If we don't need leadership, we're all just, gonna, but I'll call BS, right? No, we do need leadership. We need those who are willing to go to extraordinary sacrifices to ensure that our people be in a better condition. And I real quick, McCall, I wanted to touch on the quote from Kwame Ture that you gave. And I think a great context I'll give for this is every election season, we get into these increasing debates around whether or not Black people should vote, right?
Right.
And for me, I just be so over them and I don't participate anymore. Because for me, it's like, what's the argument for? Yeah, go ahead, go vote. Good luck. All right, now, like, big clap, you voted. You free yet? No. Okay, so I'm still over here working. Come holler at me, right? I don't need to go smash on you for voting.
Yeah.
I mean, what good is that going to do me?
That's right.
Now, if on November 5th, you still not ready to go work for our people, then I know, okay, you wasn't really that serious.
That's right.
Right? But I don't need to go get off on you and tell you off and da-da-da. Nah, see, that's not the spirit of love.
That's right.
The spirit of love, when you love your wife, right? Or your husband, when you love, right? You don't do things with the spirit or the intention of breaking or crippling. You do things with the spirit of uplifting, right? I'm not going to get our people to change our electoral behavior just by smashing on them, right? Yes, we can inform. Yes, we can guide, we can educate, right? But what might be most successful is if we could demonstrate a better alternative, if we could demonstrate an example of what nationalism looks like in 2020. And I believe that is the charge and the challenge of those who consider themselves Black nationalists and Pan-Africans today. It's not how well can you talk the talk, it's how well can you walk the walk. Do you actually have schools our people can go to? Do you actually have hospitals? Do you actually have farmland? Do you actually have food? Can you meet any of the natural needs that our people have? Or are you just here to talk? That's the challenge of the Black nationalists and Pan-Africanists today. Can you put it into action?
Right. I think, and this is something that I've been like thinking about in terms of an analogy to give, in terms of how to approach our people and our conditions, right? And it goes in alignment, right, with what you said, with the example of voting, right? You will have those of our people who have the knowledge and the information, and they have all the history, right? But it's only applied, right, to disparage, or it's only applied to condemn or shame those of our people who do go vote, or who, within that example, right? And the way I sort of frame it is in the analogy of there are firefighters and then there are architects, right? And if we know the duties and responsibilities of a firefighter, they put out fires, right? That a building catches on fire, the firefighters are called, they put out the fire. It isn't the firefighter's job, though, to rebuild that structure, or if a fire totally consumes a building in flames and it burns down, the firefighters put out that fire, right? But it's somebody else's job to come and build a new structure, right? With this analogy, I believe that there are many of us who are firefighters, but believe that is the end all be all in terms of doing that work or contributing to our people, right? We think just by putting out that fire, if the fire is don't go vote, I'm gonna put out that fire. Whoa, all right, none of us voted. Woohoo! But there was no intentional effort in terms of giving that alternative, right? There was no new structure or new institution put in place. There was no architecture work being done, right? So what I believe is that many of us do firefighting type of work, believing, right, we are architects, believing we are building schools, believing we are doing these things, right? But really what needs to be done, right, is a more intentional application towards architecture, right? We certainly need fires to be put out, right? But we don't intend to go back to occupying that building that was once a tall building and is now ashes, right? I want to live in a new house, a better house, right? That isn't the firefighter's job, though. It's up to the architect, right? So I think that's important, in all aspects. Again, when we talk about contributing to our people, and not just contributing, but constructively working to transform, right, conditions and behaviors and values, right? I think we need to do a more, as you said, right, a more internalized reflection, right, in terms of are we doing all of this studying and all of this intellectual building to just go out and look for fires to put out, right, or start fires to then put them out and look like we're doing work? Or are we doing all of this building and this, sort of tilling and sowing the seeds now, right, to then go out and be the architects our people need, right, to go out and build these new institutions and these new structures, right? And this leads me to a definition of nation building, actually. This comes from an ancestor, Kwame Koto, in 1992. I can't remember the book that it comes from, but in this text, he gives a definition, right, for nation building. And of course, I'm not necessarily accepting it as the concrete definition, but I think it's useful. So he says that Nation building is defined as the conscious and focused application of our people's collective resources, energies, and knowledge to the task of liberating and developing the psychic and physical space that we identify as ourselves. It involves the development of behaviors, values, languages, institutions, and physical structures that elucidate our history and culture, concretize and protect the present, and ensure the identity and independence of the nation. So as you can see, right, and again, this is just one definition, but it doesn't just limit nation building to just, oh, build a school, open up a bank, right? Because there's a much more all-encompassing, right, examination and a revamp that needs to be done, right? Our values, as you said, right, our beliefs, right, the ways that we think about and take care of ourselves, or don't, right, think about and take care of ourselves, right? So did you have any sort of follow-up or reflection upon just this one definition?
No, I would say we should have read that one at the beginning and just called it a night. That's an excellent definition, man. No, I wouldn't add anything to that. I think that's a beautiful statement. I think that was an excellent approach to what nation building is.
Definitely. So let me do this then, just in these last few minutes. I'll read just one more excerpt. Again, as you were talking, I put up my archives of notes and whatnot, and was finding relevant things. This comes from Kwame Nkrumah's book, Africa Must Unite. He says that a people long subjected to foreign domination does not always find it easy to translate that wish to be free into action. Under arbitrary rule, people are apt to become lethargic, their senses are dulled. Fear becomes the dominant force in their lives, fear of breaking the law, fear of the punitive measures which might result from an unsuccessful attempt to break loose from their shackles. Those who lead the struggle for freedom must break through this apathy and this fear. They must give active expression to the universal longing to be free. They must strengthen the people's faith in themselves and encourage them to take part in the freedom struggle. Above all, they must declare their aims openly and unmistakably and organize the people towards the achievement of their goal of self-government. I thought of this and wanted to share it for multiple reasons, but primarily this notion of people long subjected to foreign domination. And this goes back to what you were saying earlier, Salih, in terms of us sort of getting our wires crossed in terms of what our true objectives should be, right? And this, we can apply this to the contemporary example of, protests against police brutality and things like that. And we say, defund the police and do all of these things, right? And a critical question really needs to be raised. Are we mobilizing and doing all of these different things to truly be free from this foreign domination, from this colonization, right? Or are we simply wishing to get into a more comfortable position, right? To a place where, right, white supremacy isn't so harsh, right? It isn't so grueling, right? So again, I wanted to share this again on that notion of foreign domination. Did you have any?
Yeah, I really like that quote, and there's a lot I actually want to say about it in the last couple of minutes we have. The first thing, in direct answer to your question around, do we really want freedom of foreign domination, or do we just want a more kinder, benevolent white supremacy? 100%, we want a kinder, benevolent, more benevolent white supremacy, for sure. Like, absolutely, we want America like everybody else has it. Where it ain't too bad, just a little racism here or there. We just want to move on with our life, have some apple pie. We want to go to the game, we want to have a white girl. That's what we want. Let's be honest. Now, what's happening is that God don't want that, nor do white folks want that. So we in the minority by a lot. So what's happening is we're being forced into a situation where we're coming to realize slowly, like, shit, it's not really feasible. Okay. Damn, they just gonna keep killing us. All right. They gonna put it on news and still do it anyway. Okay. So we're slowly coming to this realization. Now, this piece around us growing up under fear and ages of fear and domination. Man, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was and is a master teacher and a master psychologist when it came to understanding the inner workings of the Black man and woman of America. Many people questioned why Elijah Muhammad was so harsh and so firm with us, right? For those who are not familiar, in the nation in his time and still to this day, the messenger of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was a very formidable leader that did not tolerate much in the line of BS, right? If you violated the law of Islam, he would put you out from our society. And then if anybody cried about it, he would put them out too. You're out. Come back when you're ready to sympathize with truth. And he didn't have very much outward appearing sentiments of like mercy or like fragility or like, oh, baby, I know it's so hard. You grew up in white America and that's why you slept with your brother's wife. And it wasn't none of that, right? It was, we're not having that. No, sir. We're going to do this. It was a militaristic organization, rank and file. You obey orders. And the mastery and the wisdom of his mastery was that he understood the psychological placement of our people. Well, as a people, we, as a result of slavery, we don't want the right to make a decision, right? Many of us actually would rather somebody else tell us what to do. And when we're given too much choice in the daggone matter, we don't know what to do with it because we haven't had the education, we haven't had the development, we haven't had the institutional understanding, we don't have a organizational framework, right? And so what he did in a nutshell, he kind of developed a dictatorship, right? A militaristic organization, rank and file, you take orders, right? And that style of governance is really necessary when you are immature. When you're a child and you're 5 years old, you don't need to be negotiating with your mom about what you should eat for dinner. Because at 5 years old, you might choose ice cream for dinner every day. Is that nutritious and healthy? No. So what happens? Mom is a dictator temporarily as the child grows up and becomes more developed so that they can act in an independent manner. We as a people suffer from an extreme amount of political immaturity. We are infantile in our political and economic and moral behaviors. We do things on a jiff, not on a calculated intentionality, right? And this goes from the personal to the more macro economic and political spectrum, right? On our personal levels, right? Our people suffer tremendously. Yes, the white man's healthcare system is serving us. Yes, we live in food deserts. Yes, these things are true. But you cannot say that we are in control of our daily eating habits. We're in control of our exercise habits. We're in control over whether or not we're sleeping with each other's husbands and wives and spouses. And you know how we get down. You can't say that we're in that personal self-control. And as a result of this lack of personal control, right, we need something or somebody to come and force us into the correct and appropriate behavior as we develop the maturity to be able to make decisions that make sense in and of ourselves, right? And so many people condemn, for example, our brother Muammar Gaddafi of Libya because he ran its government as a dictatorship. And I heard the men say, listen, when you are young, mom is a dictator until you are able and old enough and developed enough and mature enough to handle the things of life and the vicissitudes of life on your own, right? And you develop into that. So yeah, democracy might be the most evolved sort of political government, right? But as a people, we're not in our most evolved state. We're still in a slave master relationship and mentality. So it will take us time. You know what I'm saying? And I can say from my personal leadership, my personal experience, if I would have listened to people throughout my time as a leader on so many decisions, brother, I would have made terrible decisions because as a people, we just lack the maturity. That's honest, right? And so as you read that quote around fear and our years of subjugation and colonialism, it made me think, you know, we want what white America offers, but we don't really want that. We don't really know what to do with that, right? What we really want and yearn for is freedom. And most of us aren't willing to make the sacrifice to do it yet. So we need opposites that can push us, that can create the tension necessary to push us to doing better. If you don't have anybody that's willing to hold the line, man, then we cannot win. It's one thing I love about Minister Farrakhan. I love this. I love it. I love it. Is that you will never find him bending the line for political expediency. You won't find it. You won't find his position changing because the majority said this, because the majority is fickle. We're so easily moved as a people. No, as a leader and as leaders, we have to have a firmness and a confidence in that which is right. Because it's only out of that that we actually can grow and move our people into a better condition and place and space. If we move every time the wind blows, we won't be successful, you know? We need leaders that are willing to take the shots. You know what I'm saying? We need leaders that are willing to be like, yeah, y'all not gonna like me about this decision. I understand. But it's necessary, it's right, and it is guided by these principles. Not just by my own opinion, not because I thought it this morning or somebody spoke to me and whispered in my ear last night, but we need leaders that are willing and ready and able to make real decisions on the basis of principles that are everlasting and eternal. That's what I would say in response to that quote.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And on the notion of principles and making those firm decisions, right, I'm reminded of something I read from Thomas Sankara, and what he says is that the positions we take don't always make our people happy, but we face a dilemma. We either remain silent on positions we believe to be correct, consciously lying in order to enjoy the good graces of those who can supposedly help us to please our delicate and powerful partners, or we tell the truth in the firm conviction that we are helping our own people.
Yes, sir. Go ahead. Go ahead. That was a good one. And it reminds me of Amilcar Cabral, who said, tell no lies.
That's right. Yeah.
Offer no easy solutions to the masses. Mm-hmm. That's what the whole get out to vote thing really is. Really just us trying to offer our people an easy solution when it ain't that easy. See, it's a lot harder to say, black folks, everybody need to save $10 a month, put it in the bank account. That's hard. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot harder to say, oh, we all got to make a sacrifice. We all need to get up and move to this area. We all need to go do A. See, those are hard. It's easy to say, oh, just get out and vote. You know, it'll make us, you know what I'm saying?
That's right.
No lies.
That's right.
Offer no easy solutions to the mass. I love it. Thank you so much, McConaughey.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I'll share one last quote. This comes from that same, from a different lecture that Kwame Ture gave. He said, as revolutionaries, as those who organize and galvanize the masses of our people, we cannot look for the easy road. We cannot try to pursue the shortcuts or the quickest route. He said the slave looking for the easiest road to freedom will never be free, right? Because just as easy as it was to gain that freedom, it will be just as easy to put that person back into enslavement, right? He says that Harriet Tubman did not look for the shortcut, right, on her many trips, right, to free our enslaved ancestors, right? So we need to apply that same mentality, right? That by no means are we going to, hop on a Zoom and say, all right, y'all, what's the fastest route to liberation? Whatever the fastest route is, that's the route we take in, right? Because we certainly won't get that far. As we wrap it up here, I would definitely like to open it up to those of us who are tapped in right now. If there are any questions, any thoughts on our minds, right? A whole lot of information was just presented to us. So if there are any questions or comments or anything, please feel free to either put them in the Zoom chat, or you can definitely unmute yourself and make your voice be heard. In the meantime, what I would like to do is put in just a brief post-evaluation in the group chat. This is just a brief Google form. If everyone who was a participant can just take a few moments to fill it out. We use it to learn how to improve our programming for the future, right? We certainly don't believe that we have all the perfect formulas and the answers in terms of how to engage our people. So your feedback is definitely appreciated with that. But again, if there are any final questions or comments or anything like that, or Brother Salih, you had any last thoughts you wanted to leave us with, that'll pretty much wrap things up for us. Anybody? No. And again, I put the post-evaluation link in the group chat, the Zoom chat. But Taharka, yes, please go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation, Salih. As always, much critical information to reflect upon. But one thing that I'm thinking about is, and that I wrestle with as a leader is like wrestling with, yes, like some of our people may be politically immature or need better guidance, but sometimes I struggle with figuring out at what point do I not allow wiggle room, right? At what point do I, especially, right, if the goal is to galvanize the masses, right? And with the understanding that it's hard to move forward or to build something sustainable without the people, right, in step. But if my position that I believe is the correct way forward is contrary, right, to what my base is believing, like, I guess it's just the applicability of moving that way. It's easier said than done, right? Especially when you haven't already built, I guess, the trust of the people and things like that. So you enter into conversation and sparring over things, but sometimes you sort of argue in circles, or even with sufficient evidence being provided of your position being valid, the people still disagree with falling in line with that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think there's a tactical component to the answer, and then there's like a more like spiritual and like personal development side of it, right? So I think the spiritual personal development side is that when we think about balance in this context, here's what balance is for me, right? The earth is floating in space, right? It's spinning on its axis. We don't feel the fact that it's spinning on its axis. We don't feel the commotions of the earth because the earth is in a particular level of obedience to a law that dominates itself, right? It's spinning at 23.5 degrees on its axis at 1,034 and 1/3 miles per hour. And by doing this at a constant rate with no interruptions, we don't feel the imbalance that naturally should be impacting the earth, right? Out of its obedience, right? So I say on the personal and spiritual side is that we all have to really strive for alignment, that which we are doing in an out-facing manner aligns with what's happening on the internal, right? So if on the internal, I believe, sure, I'll go for it. On the internal, I believe that, do I want to go there? On the internal, there are some beliefs that I have, right, that may not be in agreement with what a portion of our people or a dominant voice in our community might say, right? How do I handle that, right? First of all, I can't be found being disharmonious externally, internally. That will eventually corrupt the self, and it weakens one's ability to stand on other things because I faltered on this one thing. The minister writes that struggle is ordained for us, and that everything of value has a difficulty factor attached to it. And each thing that we do has a greater and greater difficulty factor. And the greatness of this difficulty factor indicates to us the level of value it is on this particular issue. So I will go there. So we take the issue of homosexuality in our community, right? And the varying opinions and perspectives on it, right? I'm a Muslim. I have a very particular perspective and opinion on it, right? As a Muslim, I can't be disharmonious to what I believe because of what the cultural political pressures might indicate. Because in so doing, not only am I, maybe succumbing to something I may or may not believe, right? But more importantly, I have turned heels on an issue that was significant and relevant enough that it causes this much tension and commotion, right? There's value here in the discussion. And if I turn from my willingness to speak up and to speak forward into the discussion, then what I do, I actually silence that which God put in me that might need to be heard in the world, right? Now, on the tactical side, there's a tactical side, right? There's a tactical political side of understanding the immediate political context you're in, right? Some organizations work on consensus. Some organizations work on a vote. Some organizations work on whoever's in executive leadership, et cetera. Now, these tactical pieces create greater dictate for how I can voice my inner being or my inner sense of belief, right? That might shape the tactical approach. But the spiritual approach is the only way to balance oneself is by using principle as the fulcrum, the balance point, right? Proper principle must be the fulcrum. If the fulcrum is just what people say or what the majority says, right, then I can find myself out of alignment. And if I'm out of alignment, then ultimately I'm going to be more and more useless to the people.
Thank you for that, brother. Any other questions or comments or anything you want to share? We are just about at time, but we can definitely take, one last thought or question. And just a friendly reminder, right? Please take a moment to complete that post-evaluation. It helps us, right? Just learn how to improve programming, right? What went well, what didn't go well, all those good things, because there will never be room for improvement, right?
I do have a question. However, it might come out a little bit unorganized because it's just in my head. I don't know how to say it, but I'm gonna say it. With building a nation, are people that are doing the groundwork, the mud work, and the grassroots work, have a certain outlook on not education, but just like intellectuals, basically people that go to college or people that read books, right? How can we mend those two together, as in the intellectual and the organizer on the ground, in a way to build up a nation, if that's even possible? Because I'm already knowing yeah, I'm just gonna ask that. That's it.
That's a great question. I want to recommend a lecture from the minister. I'll send it to you, Isaiah. It was a Savior's Day. I want to say 1985. It's in Gary, Indiana. Kwame Ture speaks prior to him. And no, not 85, maybe 84. And they both speak a lot about what you're asking, right? How do we make this connection between the intellectual Black intelligentsia and the masses of Black people, right? And what the minister referred to it as, he said, if the intelligentsia is like the head of our people that's supposed to be doing the thinking and the deep thinking, the thought process, etc., right? And the masses is the body, right? He said, we are a people without a neck. There's no connection right now between the head and the body. Right now, as a people, the intelligentsia is off doing some old, for lack of a better word, some weird stuff, right? And the masses are suffering, right? It ain't necessarily intelligentsia is out there getting hit by the police and poverty, et cetera, all the time. Now, that's the masses. The intelligentsia is supposed to be the ones advocating for us, but the advocacy is a little limited right now, you know? So what does it take? The minister has a study guide titled The Characteristic of Humility. And what I think, honestly, it takes a lot of humility. It takes, like, you think about Kwame Ture, brother, that's a black man who had a college degree, but you could not find him distant from the people on the ground, right? There's this great picture my brother Ice Life has of Kwame Ture. It's a picture of him on a mule, riding a mule down in Mississippi for the Lowndes County Freedom Movement, right? On a mule. That's the kind of humility that we need. The kind of humility that can just go and talk to regular black folks and really sit with them and talk to them and value them and appreciate them. Kind of to this point, McConnell asked me about earlier around examining our leaders, right? See, when a lot of us as intellectuals go back home, we go back home judging everybody, telling them what you are or are not doing right, and telling them what you did wrong and right as a parent, and telling them about all the trauma they gave you, and telling them about they religious perspectives, and telling them about why you're not Christian, or right? We go back getting off, right? And it's like, dog, who are you? You've been learning for 2 years, and you coming back getting on your family who have a lifetime of being good black people, right? So I think a lot of it, a real part of what it takes is really just a characteristic of humility, where we can go to our people with love in our hearts and not judgment, not going to tell them A, B, or C. No, go with love. Go with an offering. You know what I'm saying? Go with something of value to them. The truth of the matter is, a lot of what we're learning isn't very valuable, to be honest. A lot of what we're learning how to be good cogs in a bad system. But many of us aren't learning how to actually build systems, how to build institutions, build things for our people. So I'll say for you specifically, though, is I would say, man, you're doing some of that work already, really connecting with our people on the real ground level. You know what I'm saying? I think that in a larger way, we just have to make that more real, more honest. I think a lot of us aren't honest about where we're at. You know, a lot of us want to pretend that we here for the masses, and we're not. We're really here to ensure middle-class black people might have a better chance to stay middle-class black people. We have to challenge those notions, right? Internal to our own space, in the college spaces, we have to challenge black college students. What are you going to do for your people permanently in the future? Not what are you going to do for yourself? Not how you going to get a job? Not how you going to do a nonprofit where you can have a Benz and all your employees have a little bucket. Not none of that, right? Because we know them games, right? That's not what we're talking about. What can each of us do to make the most meaningful contribution we can make to our people? And I think that's where it's at. I hope I answered your question, brother.
You did. Thank you.
I actually have a really quick question for you, Brother Salih. It's good to see you. So my question is quick. I know we're running close on time, but as you know, I organize quite often. Well, right now in my capacity in civil rights spaces. And so oftentimes the solution that is offered is voting as a primary solution to solving the problems that plagues our community, right? But what role do you think, or do you even think building strategic electoral power has a role in any way or a component of building the foundations of nationhood? If so, how? Or if not, why not?
I think at this point, no, because we've tried it and we've not borne benefit, right? Mm-hmm. What I mean, we tried it, right? On the biggest stage, President Obama. But on much smaller stages, particularly in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a litany of black mayors, black elected officials across the country. The Harold Washington days, we had black mayors in all the major cities, you know what I'm saying? And this is at the heyday of black destruction, for lack of a better term, you know? So I think it's very minimal, you know? I think that we've convinced ourselves that we can outgame the creator of the game. And it's just like, no, it's not realistic. I think the other thing I would say is the minister used to say, politics without economics is like symbol without substance, you know? So whereas we put all this energy into like developing these, our political capacity to vote, et cetera, we don't have the economics, and we don't have the economics, is meaningless because we can't make any of it stand. As a matter of fact, we can't even benefit from having Black people in these positions without the proper economic structures. White people vote folks like Trump in because they getting bread off of that. We vote people in because we hope to get treated nice, right? There's a great data point, and I'm blanking on it, but like 2016, the Democratic Party spent like 6% of its private contracting with people of color owned businesses. So like, even on like a small scale, we don't get the reward that we should get. You get what I'm saying? On the economic side. So I would say minimal at this time. Now, if we really work to develop economic infrastructures that can make the political gains mean something, okay, then maybe. But today, I just don't think we have any evidence. And I don't say that to mean that we have to condemn everybody that's doing vote work. I think we just have to put up some cleaner glasses as alternatives.
That's valid.
Thank you, Jazzy. Good to see you.
Thank you, Salih. It's good to see you too.
Any last questions or comments or concerns? Well, hopefully no concerns, but any last questions or anything like that? If not, I would definitely extend my deepest gratitude and appreciation to you, Brother Salih, for taking the time and the energy to share space, virtual space, right, with us all on this rendition of hard teaching. And you know, we it's definitely hard teaching, right? But we believe that only the hard teaching can really produce that hard learning, right? Rather than just sort of exchanging and juggling fancy words and things like that sort of get us feeling lofty about our people, but really challenging ourselves, right, critically and intellectually, we are able to reap a much more tangible, right, and effective outcome. So thank you again, Brother Salih. To all of our participants, I would also like to extend many thanks and gratitude for taking your time and energy to tap into this. We are nothing without each other and without ourselves as a collective. So with that being said, I would like to just say peace and Black power to you, Brother Salih. Peace and Black power to all the participants. My name is Makona Tendaji, the Political Education Director for the African Black Coalition. This has been another episode of Hard Teaching. Tune in for our last addition to the series tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Jada Johnson, Sister Jada, our current Black Student Programs Director, is doing some hard teaching on Afro-Caribbean women and resistance. So we're definitely ending it with a triumph. So tune in for that. That's tomorrow night. Thank you again, Brother Salih, to all our participants. Peace and Black power, ready for the revolution.
Peace and Black power.
Peace and Black power.